The morning sunlight filtered through the windows of the downtown office building, casting a golden hue over the marble floors. The city was buzzing with its usual energy, the streets alive with the constant hum of movement. Inside, the employees were settling into their desks, already preparing for the day's workload. But there was an air of tension in the department that morning. For months, a sense of superiority had prevailed within the police precinct. The officers in this particular branch had always prided themselves on their badge, that symbol of power and authority. It wasn't just the insignia of their uniform, but the years of history that came with it. The kind of history that had seen generations of officers walk through these very halls with the firm belief that they were untouchable, that their status was guaranteed by their badge. They could bend the law, command respect, and secure their place in society, no questions asked. But today was different. Today, everything was about to change. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. But they weren't the usual ones. The department had been buzzing with rumors for weeks about a new boss being appointed. The higher-ups had been hinting at a big change, but no one expected it to be as monumental as what was about to unfold. The door to the precinct's command office opened, and in walked a man who immediately commanded attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a crisp suit that contrasted sharply with the usual uniforms worn by the officers. His presence was powerful, and his confident stride seemed to say, "I am in charge now." He was black. The officers in the room exchanged uneasy glances. The whispers began. For some, the shift in leadership was difficult to grasp. In an institution where tradition ran deep, where old values and outdated prejudices had held sway for so long, the idea of a black man stepping into a role of authority was unthinkable to some. "Is this a joke?" whispered Officer Harris, a veteran of the force who had served for over 20 years. "They really think a man like him can lead us?" But it wasn't a joke. The new boss, Detective Samuel Jackson, had earned his position through years of hard work and unyielding determination. He had risen through the ranks, not because of his race, but because of his exceptional skills, his unwavering commitment to justice, and his ability to navigate the complex and often murky world of law enforcement. He was no stranger to the difficulties that came with being a black man in a predominantly white profession, but he had never let it deter him. His work ethic had spoken for itself. As he stood at the front of the room, the officers fell silent. His voice was calm but firm, and it carried an undeniable authority. "I know this may be a shock to some of you," Jackson began, "but I'm here to make changes. Not because I want to, but because it's necessary. This precinct needs to evolve, and I'm here to lead it into that future." The officers remained seated, their faces a mixture of disbelief and resentment. They had always believed that their badge, the legacy of their ancestors in law enforcement, made them untouchable. The notion that a black man would be their superior was a challenge to everything they had known. But Jackson wasn't here to pander to anyone's expectations. He had worked too hard to let such sentiments define him. He was determined to prove that leadership wasn't about skin color or status. It was about the ability to lead, to inspire, and to bring justice to those who needed it most. Over the next few days, Jackson observed the dynamics of the precinct. He wasn't quick to make any drastic changes at first, but he could feel the undercurrents of resistance. Some of the officers didn't even attempt to hide their disdain. Others tried to put on a facade of cooperation, but their actions spoke louder than their words. They resented his authority and were determined to find ways to undermine him. Harris, in particular, made no secret of his displeasure. He'd been with the department long enough to believe he knew how things should work. He had a reputation to uphold, and Jackson's appointment was a slap in the face to everything he stood for. One afternoon, as they crossed paths in the hallway, Harris couldn't help but make his feelings known. You might be the boss on paper, but you don't belong here," Harris sneered. "We've been doing things our way for years. You think you can just walk in here and change it all?" Jackson didn't flinch. He was used to these kinds of comments. He had faced far worse throughout his career. Instead of engaging in a verbal altercation, He simply met Harris's gaze with calm resolve. "I'm not here to change things for the sake of change, Harris," Jackson replied. "I'm here to make this department better. And if you're not willing to be part of that, maybe this isn't the place for you." For a moment, Harris was silent. His usual bravado faltered, and he walked away without another word. It wasn't a victory for Jackson, but it was a small step toward proving that he was not to be underestimated. As weeks went by, Jackson implemented changes that slowly began to shift the culture of the precinct. He focused on community outreach, diversity training, and holding officers accountable for their actions. The old guard didn't like it, but the new recruits saw a leader they could respect, a leader who cared about justice, fairness, and integrity. But the true test of Jackson's leadership came when the precinct was called to investigate a high-profile case involving police misconduct. The media was watching, and the pressure was mounting. It would have been easy to give in to the system, to turn a blind eye to the corruption that had seeped into the ranks over the years. But Jackson knew that this was the moment that would define him. He made the tough decision to hold his fellow officers accountable, despite the fallout it would undoubtedly cause. The investigation was thorough, the truth was uncovered, and several officers were arrested for their involvement in the misconduct. It was a watershed moment for the precinct and for Jackson himself.